Hey folks, it's Nick from Bootstrap Farmer. A few weeks ago, we hosted a live webinar in which we talked about IPM, integrated pest management, both with insects, rodents, snakes, and varmints. We talked about the differences in hoop house seeds and why you may want to pick a hoop house variety over an open pollinated seed. And we talked about growing in the heat, where we talk about ventilation, shade cloth, irrigation, and automated rollout sites. Today, we're going to be talking about high tunnel growing considerations. And specifically in this one, we are going to go over integrated pest management, and we're going to go a little bit deeper, and we're also, aside from insects, we're going to talk about varmints. We're going to talk about crop varieties for high tunnels versus outdoors, so I'm going to dig a little bit deeper there than I normally would. A lot of times when we do these high tunnel consideration, it's just a big overview, but I'm dialing down very specific to some of these. We're going to talk a little bit about shade cloth, ventilation, irrigation, and then just a little bit about automated roll-up sides. So integrated pest management, a lot of people, you'll hear that as IPM. If we're talking about the common bugs that we're going to find inside of a greenhouse that's going to be a problem for the crops, we're talking aphids, whiteflies, thrips, spider mites, caterpillars, fungus gnats, leaf hoppers, and mealybugs. And these are insects that are either going to eat the leaves, which is then in turn going to make the plant have a hard time. They're going to eat the stem, that's going to kill the plant, or they're going to eat the fruit. If we find the cause and eliminate and reduce the pest, we're talking about crop selection, in which we're going to cover a little bit why that matters so much in greenhouse varieties specifically when we get to that section. Overwatering seems to be one of the bigger problems, because if we overwater, we have standing water. Standing water attracts some of those insects that we mentioned just a second ago. Open doors. It's real easy to feel like we need to ventilate with an open door, and that's why we're going to talk about that ventilation near the end, but making sure that that hoop house is sealed up and that we're using some of the physical barriers that we'll get into in here in just a second. Insect netting or screens. Here on the top picture on the right, you'll see that we have a roll-up side, but you'll also see that white screen, and that's insect netting. I'm going to get into that specific on the next slide. We also have double entry systems. I don't have a picture of that, but whenever I go to like a bigger, more commercial, especially like an indoor grow, but I have seen it in other hoop houses and greenhouse, you'll have almost like a screened room that you enter. You'll do some IPM situations and where you're stepping in insecticide soap, like in a little water bath to get it off of your shoes. You'll maybe glove up, maybe put on some special protection, and then sealing gaps with a door sweep or weather stripping. So that picture in the middle, I use that because there's just a little bit of gap in between the double doors, and that's a good place to put either a brush type, especially on the ground, that's the sweep, or the weather stripping that as it closes, it presses that foam together and helps to keep bugs out. When it comes to IPM in a hoop house, you're going to get bugs inside of the hoop house at one point. The name of the game right now is we're talking about reducing the pest pressure and trying to keep that out as much as possible. So if you do have to do anything, it's minimal. One question, and I base a lot of these slides off of reoccurring questions that either customer service gets or that we'll see in Facebook groups or something like that. So can you use shade cloth as insect netting? If you're trying to get grasshoppers out, absolutely. But if you take a look at, this is a 50% shade cloth in a tape version. We're going to talk about monofilament shade cloth here in a little bit. But to compare it, a quarter on its edge is 1.75 millimeters, where insect netting is 0.78 by 0.25 millimeters, while a whitefly, aphids, leaf miners, all that, it starts usually at 1 to 2 millimeters on average. So it also, the insect netting has optical protection, in which it has a sheen to it that insects typically don't like. So as insects are moving in and about the farm, they see that sheen and they automatically go away from it. It has a 5-year UV resistance, and it does protect against some of those smaller varieties and, of course, the big ones as well. But if you just try to use shade cloth, they're going to walk right through there. If we're talking about good sanitation practices to reduce that pest pressure, we're trying to relieve places for these insects to hide. So as we're pruning our tomatoes, our cucumbers, harvesting any lettuce, anything like that, I use the picture on the bottom because this is really nice and clean. This is after a pruning situation in which we're pruning, they're falling down onto the landscape fabric, and the leaves are picked up. So we're not giving the insects any place to hide except for in the mulch. It's one of those things where you can either have landscape fabric, you can have mulch. Different people do different things, and that's what makes hoop house education like so interesting. Is there's not one set thing that we ever see that's almost the gospel, right? Everybody has a unique situation, but this is a good example of it's really easy to treat clean wood mulch like that. If you do have to treat with an insecticidal soap or neem or diatomaceous earth, keeping that leaf debris out is going to be the number one thing to keep those insects from having a safe place to hide. We're also going to sanitize our tools and equipment. A lot of that's fungal issues, mold, not spreading that around so much. And again, we're trying to avoid overwatering inside of the greenhouse. You're going to see some of these things pop up over and over again. A lot of people like to use beneficial insects. Ladybugs are the ones I see the most when we're out and about. They're easy. People like them. They don't get freaked out. Like they seem like it's a people pleaser, especially if you're having tours or something like that inside of your hoop house. Really easy to release. I like, and I always got mine from naturesgoodguys.com. This is not necessarily a bootstrap recommendation, but my own personal recommendation for what I used to use. They have a great resource on their website and a really good YouTube channel, so check them out. Parasitic wasps are also something you can release if you're having caterpillar issues. And again, Nature's Good Guys, they have a lot more. I'm not going to go into depth on how to release that because they do such a great job and they have it available. We can also do some environmental controls where if we have proper ventilation, we're thinking about air movement. But if we're just giving a little tiny breeze, a lot of times in microgreen growers, you'll see those little fans that are pushing air along the microgreens. Not only does it help reduce fungal and mold pressure, but it also keeps those flies from kind of settling in on a crop. And it's no different than a hoop house, just at a bigger scale. So circulation fans, which are different than the fresh air intake fans that we have, it's going to create, not only is it going to reduce the pockets of hot and cold air, and kind of maintain a more even air temperature, but it's also just going to give a nice little gentle breeze. Now, I have sticky traps on here. A lot of people like to think of those as, hey, we're combating whiteflies or we're combating aphids or nits or anything like that. It's more of a monitoring situation. Now, can you use it for IPM and can you control with it? Absolutely, but it's more of an indication of a bigger problem. Standing water, lack of air, maybe places for the insects to hide. So think of the sticky traps, and we have them in both yellow and blue, and they attract different bugs depending on what your crops or what your issues may be, and you can read more about that. But making sure that you have sticky traps deployed as a monitoring device as you're going through and doing your daily checks are going to let you know that more likely you have a bigger issue at hand. Crop rotation, different pests like to settle in different areas, and going ahead and doing that crop rotation, which more likely you're going to be doing seasonally, but if you have the room, and if instead of just growing tomatoes on one side of the tunnel, not only is it a good practice from a nutrient rotation standpoint, but moving that to the different side of the hoop house, it's just good practice to get into. So if we talk about, I really like Monterey if we're talking about any kind of more natural insecticides or something. Neem oil is good if you're looking at soft-bodied insects. So again, aphids, whiteflies, any type of little fly that gets in there and goes about, typically that's going to have a soft body. I have found that number one, I want everybody to really understand that making more neem oil isn't necessarily the right way to go. You can start to burn the leaf tissue. So really take a look at those labels and make sure that you're spraying the correct amount. And again, I really like the Monterey brand. It's always worked well for me. Insecticidal soap, it's basically rinsing. It's nothing more than rinsing the insects off of the leaf, but I would recommend to spot treat that. I wouldn't do the whole house at any one time, and I would make sure that you're trying that out before you do a full application, because again, a little bit of soap goes a long way, and it's really easy to burn your plants sometimes. Diatomaceous earth, this one's super popular. Sprinkling at the base of plants, and again, we're looking at soft-bodied insects. It says ants. and caterpillars, and you're going to have to use a lot of diatomaceous earth. Basically, it's like a mica or a silica that's been ground down into a fine powder, and as those insects go through there, it winds up cutting those soft bodies. So if you think about beetles or some caterpillars that just have a rougher skin, it's not really going to affect them too much, and you're going to have to use a different type of spray. University of Tennessee at Knoxville has my favorite 2 publications when it's talking about insect and mite pest management in greenhouses. It's going to save us a lot of time today. It's a great resource. Go to the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, type in PB 1549. That link is going to come up, and it's any kind of insect that's inside of a greenhouse with the controls, both natural and a more synthetic, if that's what you choose to do. No judgment, and there's the application rates and just a lot of good information on that. The other thing, while you're there, you might as well go ahead and type in the next link, and that's going to get you to Tomato Disease and Insect Control Manual. This document is by far, if you're growing tomatoes and you have any type of problem, it has pictures, it has examples, and just things to look out for, good practices. Just it took me a long time to find that, so I want to make sure I share it. So long-term pest management, this comes down to any other thing that you would do on your farm, in that you have to intentionally walk your grounds and take notes and do consistent monitoring. Those sticky traps, being observant, looking out for tears, doing the inspections as part of a routine. Grab your coffee, grab your whatever smoothie you need in the morning, and use that time to make sure that you're making your list for both you, your family members, or anybody else helping you out on the farm. If we're talking about, if we do see a problem and we're dealing with it, really pay attention to that area. Repairing, cleaning, limiting access to the hoop house is a big one for me. I know a lot of times people will ask, can I bring my Girl Scouts out, or can I bring this group or that group? We don't know where these people have been. We don't know if they're running around on the farm collecting bugs and then going to the hoop house last or in the middle of a tour. And that seems to really be a problem with infestation. So if you don't have a double screen situation, still having a foot bath, which is nothing more than like, if you go to Tractor Supply Co. or something like that, they'll have mats for boots, just a little bit of soap, a little dash of bleach or something like that. Put them on your shoes. Make sure nobody has some shoes that will get bleached out, but just any kind of soap to rinse off the soles of the shoes is going to drastically help from bringing pests inside of the hoop house. So give that a try, and be ready with the biological controls, or whether you're doing a natural insecticide or like. Now we're going to get into away from the bugs and talk about varmints. We haven't really covered this before, but anytime Julian and I go and do a live hoop house workshop, this always comes up. Mice, rats, rabbits, moles, voles. I want to get into that a little bit. Physical barriers, not unlike the insect netting on the hoop house. A lot of people like to use a chicken wire or hardware cloth. The hardware cloth is better for smaller rodents. Depends on the rodent, right? Or depends on the varmint. If you're worried about moles or voles or something chewing through it, you might want to get a tighter mesh depending on the size of the rodent in your area or that you have problems with. So moles and voles, remember that they're only digging down as they're traveling across 1 to 4 inches, and they typically dig their deeper tunnels to like live in, hibernate in, kind of have their den or whatever. If you just happen to build your hoop house over that, you may have a little bit of a problem, but more than likely, we see a lot of people do one of two things. They'll either dig a trench, which as you're building your hoop house and you're likely to be building up and building your irrigation away, that's a good time to go ahead and put that in, if that's in your area and if it's a concern. 9 times out of 10, we go to places, they may have an issue once every couple of years, or it's not an ongoing thing, but sometimes you may be in an area that has groundhogs or these moles or a rabbit problem, especially if you're on the outskirts of town and more houses are being built around you, and that's forcing that wildlife to move. That could cause an issue. It's just part of being vigilant and taking a look at what's around you, right? A good way to stop that is to go ahead and put that perimeter of either chicken wire, hardware cloth. I would suggest hardware cloth over chicken wire at this stage because you're more likely to have a little mole or little vole, which tends to be one of the smaller rodents. If we're taking a look at the baseboard, this is why it's so important to build that hoop house on a level ground, in that if you have a little bit of a gap, that's a big hole for a mouse or a rabbit or a rat or something to get into. So go ahead and make sure that either covering flat with the chicken wire or the hardware cloth, or making sure that you're at least bringing the soil and tamponing it down where it can't get in, and just limiting access a little bit. So a lot of people worry about deer. This, I do feel like either you're going to have a deer problem or you're not, kind of depending on your area. So making sure that if it is an issue, you have resources out there. Fish and Wildlife may come out and offer suggestions. There's deterrents, things like motion activated lights or sprinklers, where the one on the right, but the top, there's a little sensor. Just like if somebody was to walk in, a light would come on, this activates water supposedly hitting. I see a lot of this kind of stuff, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes you have to use several different things. I've had good luck with the ultrasonic repellents. I didn't know if that would work so well, and that's just simply typing in motion activated sprinkler or ultrasonic repellents and doing your own research and seeing which one of those works best. Natural repellents. So cayenne pepper is garlic is pretty popular for small gardeners. I had really good luck with predatory urine, specifically silver fox spray, but man, that stuff is so concentrated, and you've got to be so careful in that. Wear gloves, put out just a little bit and get out of there, man. It'll almost make you sick. It's so strong. So when a rabbit or something like that smells that fox spray, and again, you can get that in the hunting section in the fall time. One of your big box stores that has hunting supplies, go ahead and get 2 or 3 of these silver fox sprays. Sometimes it's unavailable outside of hunting season, but have that on hand. Man, a little bit goes a long, long way. Just be careful. Don't get it on your clothes. And if you do, man, don't go in the house. Maintaining a clean environment. We really have to look out for any of our supplies that comes in a paper or a polypropylene bag. Animals love to chew on those. If they get wet, they deteriorate. The paper bags will, not the polypropylene. Anything that you have to have in the hoop house that you use on the daily or use in such a high volume that the heat's not going to bother it, go ahead and put it in a bucket with a tight lid. I really like the type of lids that you put on the bucket, you hammer down once, and then you have that screw top that has the gasket. It keeps the smells out. There's a gasket around the top. So, if we're using fish meal or bone meal or something like that, some of these rodents are really attracted to that. So keep the smells out with the buckets. I've got a picture of Tracy, Kansas Garden Guy. We do a lot with him on YouTube. He has the most pristine farm, period. So that's just a good example of there's nothing in his hoop house that's going to attract. We had a discussion here at Bootstrap Farmer about animals don't know what's in the hoop house, and because they're not used to that, keeping them out with even the insect netting, they may not chew through it. They might. I see a lot of people worrying about this in the beginning, where most of the time when we go to farms, even with multiple hoop houses, rarely is it an issue. So other things that we can do, we can put up owl boxes, the farm cats. I mean, there's no farm that we go to that does not have a cat or 10 roaming about doing some of this work for us. The owl boxes, the owls are working at night, keeping especially the varmints away. Some of the dog breeds are great. And then, donkeys, aside from just being a lot of fun, they'll help keep your bigger predatory animals out. Regular inspections, again, just like we would for insects. This may be more on the outside, particularly around the perimeter of the hoop house. We're looking for chew marks or scratch marks or something like that. If you go by one morning and there's a bunch of scratches, and you go by another morning and there's scratches in the same area, put some of that cayenne pepper down. Try doing something low-key first, move them along to a different area. A lot of times these are migratory animals, and they're just looking for an easy meal. And so if we're not making it easy to get in the hoop house, or we're not making it fun for these little critters to be around it, they're going to bounce and go somewhere else. Checking for signs of burrowing or chewing or entry points, and immediately repairing any damage, whether that's to the insect netting or to the plastic itself. All right, this is more for me than for anybody else. So there's snakes coming up, there's spiders coming up, so be forewarned if you don't like these things. I don't like it when you're scrolling on Instagram and you're scrolling about and somebody throws a spider on there, man. I don't care for that, so there we go. So snakes in a hoop house, pros and cons. I mean, I can't think of too many pros other than they do tend to eat some of the littler rodents. But again, owl boxes are great. The natural repellents, sulfur, cinnamon, clove oil, crushed garlic, all around the perimeter from time to time. You don't have to do this daily, but they can deter the snakes. And you're deterring, right? I mean, there's going to get a snake in your hoop house one day for sure, guaranteed. You can deter all you want, but one day one of these is going to get in. So just kind of be ready for it. They do have commercial snake repellents. I've used that before. I really like putting sulfur out. Birds of prey. So again, we're back to the owl boxes, attracting hawks, owls to your property. The decoys, I don't know, man. The owls seem to work a little bit better. I see a lot of rubber snakes around. It's worth a try, right? A couple of bucks. These 2 snake pictures at the bottom. This was from Dallas Half Acre Farm. He sent me this. So it does happen. Just kind of be ready for it. The one on the right is in his water tank. So again, we're back to any standing water, even if it's in a tote, could attract some things that you don't want in your house. And now for the bad one, spiders. I'll go to a farm. I'm really jumpy around these insects. I don't like spiders. I can't tell you how much. But then we always get in the lively discussion about it's a natural pest control. They are low maintenance. They get in there. They do their thing. They're not going to harm humans. I know that, but I'm unreasonable when it comes to this. But there is cons, right? Because you do get spider webs on the plants. It's something you're going to have to deal with either when you're pruning or you're harvesting. If they overpopulate, that could be an issue. I mean, yikes. I just can't tell you. And then unwanted encounters, that's me. I mean, some people find these unsettling, and that's moving on. Whether you have spiders in your hoop house or not, that's a personal choice. Good luck. Crop varieties for tunnels. So we're going to get a little bit more into the weeds on this. I hope you find this interesting. And this mainly comes down to, I see in groups when people are first starting and they have an aversion to hoop house variety of seeds because of the cost. So I'm just going to try to talk through that and explain how some of these seeds came into existence and why, and we'll go from there. But before we start that, I want to talk a little bit about what crops are good for hoop houses and what may not be the best idea. Not that they can't grow. If that's what you want to do, have at it. If you want to grow a specialty crop, have at it. But in the context of this webinar in particular, we're trying to talk to folks that are either feeding their family at a high rate and they're trying to grow as much as possible at a high volume and really maximizing the dollar per square inch that's of high value real estate on your farm, or they're trying to go to market and try to make as much money as they can. So we're talking about lettuce, indeterminate tomatoes, indeterminate peppers, cucumbers. Spinach grows great. You got to take a look at your crop and if you're able to sell it, or if you could switch that out for a lettuce or more specialty leafy green. There are hoop house varieties of squash, zucchini. I personally haven't had luck with that, but I wouldn't stop that from trying. It was just one of those things where it didn't work out for me. Kale is so cold hardy. Would it not be better outside and saving some of that more temperate weather controls for something a little bit more delicate? We'll get into that in a second. Strawberries, very high value crop, take up a lot of room, and that may or may not be the best use of your hoop house, but it is a viable option, especially for people that specialize in tomatoes, and they can really maximize that hoop house for that particular fruiting crop. The bottom left picture, it was my high tunnel. I kind of do what I wanted, so I was growing some cantaloupe in there as a trial. Not a great use of space. I could have made quite a bit more money turning multiple heads of lettuce in that same space. I really like 10% of your hoop house to be for you personally, for trials, to have a good time. Flowers are a great crop. Basil, of course, is a great crop, and any of these Asian greens, specialty crops that you want to grow to the very best may be reserved for your hoop house. What makes a hoop house variety better than something that would be more suited for soil grown? It's seeds that are, and I want to clarify, we're not talking about GMO seeds. We're talking about seeds that were once heirlooms, that were genetically bred over multiple generations of seeds. Some of these breeding programs are a couple of decades old, and they're basically selecting the most positive traits from one plant to the next plant. So greenhouse variety seeds, although they are more costly, they will maximize your productivity they come on faster. They tend to be a little bit more compact in growth. And that's not to say that a tomato can't grow 50, 60, 70 feet, but it's putting on more per vine, right? So it's also good for high density planting. So you may plant a tomato or a cucumber 24, 36 inches outside. It may be a determinate in which they're going to bush out and put them all at one time. But these indeterminates, you can pack them in closer because you're pruning all the leaves away at the harvest level. You're letting that airflow in, and you're growing vertically. It also improves the quality in that we're talking about seeds that are developed for market gardeners who are taking tomato after tomato after tomato to the market, in which the customers are really demanding the same thing that they would get at the grocery store, and that they're uniform, they look the same. Not to say that there's not a market for open pollinated heirloom tomatoes. That's a big market segment, but again, we're looking to move those outside because of how they grow and their needs. Greenhouse specific challenges. It's usually a little bit more humid, even with ventilation inside of a hoop house. And so these plants are bred to absorb more humidity without having some of the fungal issues that you may get in an open pollinated variety. They can handle a little bit of a reduction in airflow because they're inherently inside of a structure. They also can align with environmental control, where they can thrive in a stable environment with diffuse light conditions provided in the greenhouse film and shade cloth. A lot of times, and this is why I really ask that you're making friends with your seed reps, especially the ones that deal with professional growers, because you can say, hey, I'm in this state. This is what we're trying to grow. Usually they'll have a rep for that state, and they'll be able to walk you through particulars that they've seen before, and it'll save you a lot of time. Field-grown hybrids are not inherently worse, but are simply unsuited to be in an enclosed environment. I think I flipped that around. I meant to say hybrid heirlooms there. So again, you can grow an heirloom inside of the hoop house for sure, but it doesn't maximize that square inch that we're really having a heavy investment on the farm. You need to maximize every little bit that you can. So paying a little bit more for that greenhouse variety. And look, we don't sell seeds, right? But paying a little bit more for that is going to give you a better yield with a reduction in labor. Water, you're still going to have to water, right? You're still going to have to do the basics, but you're going to get more plant over time. That's good for your family. That's good for your customers. In the next few slides, we're going to talk about the growth traits, the environmental adaptability, pest and disease resistance, and yield optimization a little bit more in depth. So the growth traits, again, being able to really get more plants per square foot is something that you'll see. They will grow faster in that if you have a greenhouse variety, it's built in that they have this protection. They can't really take the same wind load, rain load, and sun load that some of the open pollinated varieties can outside, because again, they're bred for inside, but they're going to come on faster and they're going to last a lot longer into the season, especially in a hoop house. We're really extending the seasons in the shoulder seasons. You're able to plant earlier in the fall, and you're able to save those crops up until the last frost date, usually a little bit past that. And again, the uniformity, I'm kind of repeating myself here a little bit because these are all things that are going to really impact your bottom line as you're growing. The controlled environment created in a greenhouse film, again, the film itself is a diffuser, not unlike if you were to take a lampshade off of a lamp and stare directly at a light bulb. Some of those open pollinator plants really like all of that direct light and can really handle it. Some of the greenhouse varieties, it's just kind of bred into them that the trade-off is we get to live in a protected environment, but there's a slight reduction in the light, but the light is scattered a little bit. And so those kind of plants can take it. And again, this is ensuring the uniform growth cycle and the reliability in what the plant is going to be able to produce. Temperature resilience. A hoop house is likely to have a warmer soil temperature protecting the roots, and the leaves are likely to take on heat earlier in the day into the later part of the day. That's a trait of some of these greenhouse varieties that are going to outshine the field grown. Using the diffuse light is something that's been bred into these plants over time. Different plants selected, hey, this one did better in a greenhouse. The next generation, hey, this one did better in a greenhouse. And those are the seeds that we're winding up buying today. Stress tolerance, the microclimates inside of that greenhouse, we have that restricted airflow. We have a higher planting density. Field grown can take a harder wind and rain load and fluctuating weather patterns. It's inherent in the fruit and how they look. And so it's just, again, it's less efficient inside than outside. Pest and disease resistance, I think dollar for dollar, if this is what you're going to spend your money on, this is why you would select a greenhouse variety. Hey, I'm growing tomatoes. We're going to do this density. And again, you're talking to your rep. I've had blossom and rot in the past. We have tobacco in their area, and we're worried about tobacco fungus getting inside of our roots and staying in there. They're powdery mildew, big problem with inside tomatoes. This can all be part of that management of selecting those seeds. If you have specific worries, if you have deficiencies in nutrients and stuff like that, soil testing is such a big part, but you can really overcome a lot of that with some of these greenhouse varieties. Yield optimization, aside from the inherent value of having that greenhouse variety and the ability to resist some of these diseases, knowing that this vine is bred to just pump out these tomatoes or cucumbers or peppers or eggplants all year long, it's really going to pay for itself. $1 per seed, given that a plant at any one time is going to have 15 pounds of fruit on it, you're really getting what you're paying for. And it's also predictable in that if the farmer's market in your area starts April 1st and you started your seeds inside and you up-potted a little bit and you went ahead and put your plants in, maybe you had to do a microclimate if you're further up north, but you already have tomatoes going the day of the market, which one of the farmers that we deal with around here, Carl, Paris Natural Farms, if you followed us for any amount of time, you've seen his work. A couple of years ago, he'd been really trying for that over the last few years. He started out with open pollinated inside a greenhouse and eventually wound his way up to where he was able to put those fruits out and be first to market before anybody else, ensuring that those customers would likely come to him the rest of the year. Kind of repeating myself a little bit, but we're going back to that diffuse light. It's really a big deal. It's really good for the plants, but it does take a better variety that's more suited for the greenhouse. Justifying the cost, higher yields, enhanced disease resistance, controlled environment adaptability, and that this is specifically for greenhouse production, year-round production, lower pest pressure, uniform quality. It's just going to be better all the way around. Again, I'm going to go back to, they do have custom breeding programs in that I need taste, I need this nutritional benefit. Shelf life is a big deal. If you're the type of farmer that's growing in one area and going several miles to other in the crates, some of them are bred to have a little bit of thicker skin. And again, if we're thinking about our responsibility as farmers from a sustainability aspect, hey, this thing is these seeds are bred to reduce certain pest pressures. That's less pesticides and it's less water. They're just going to absorb it better. I don't want to repeat myself too much to save time, but open pollination, yes, you can do it. If that's what you're just dead set on doing, but you're kind of getting away from the general output that you could do from your farmer's market. Another big question that we get is, what about the pollinators? A lot of people, you can get bee boxes, you can leave your screens open. The trade-off is now you can get more whiteflies and aphids and things like that. These seeds self-pollinate. That, and again, we're doing things inside of the hoop house in which we're constantly almost kind of banging these plants a little bit in that we harvest, we prune, we lower and lean, the circulation fans are going. That does help a little bit, but these seeds in particular can live their whole life without the introduction with any pollinators whatsoever. Leave the pollinators for the outside crops, the flowers, the open pollinated, the heirlooms, the squash, the zucchini, anything with a flower, but you don't have to worry about it inside of the hoop house. Best crops that are outside. I'm not going to read this whole list, but I am going to hit the highlights. Think about pumpkins and squash, and really sunflowers for that matter, is how much volume of space that you're going to have to take up. Can you grow a watermelon and a pumpkin in a greenhouse? For sure. Is it the best use of your space? Absolutely not. There's no greenhouse varieties of pumpkin, squash, sunflowers. Leave them outside. Let them do their thing. Brussels sprouts. I got that one in blue because Brussels sprouts, again, can take so much cold. And if you do have to protect them, a frost blanket is really all you need. I wouldn't waste the space inside of a hoop house for that. Leave it outside and get some of those more delicate lettuces that you can do a quick turn on. Wheat, I kind of put it's obvious. You can't grow enough wheat to bake a loaf of bread inside of a hoop house, and then you have this long-term crop that's going to restrict you from growing anything else. Beets are another one, super cold hardy. The peas, the corn, it doesn't make, there's a reason you don't see some of these crops inside greenhouses. So just like the open pollinator situation, if you want to grow some of these inside of a hoop house, man, I'm so happy for you. I can't even stand it. But if we're talking to market gardeners, you got to really pick and choose because we're doing this for a living. Again, so those factors I kind of just went over: cold hardiness, open pollination, size. If it doesn't make sense, if it's not going to pay for itself, these plants are. Randy Cummings, who works on our sales team, came from the seed industry, and he always said something I liked, in that these plants have to pay their own rent. And growing a cabbage inside of a hoop house, it's such a giant plant that's going to take up so much room, and you could do 20 heads of lettuce by the time you grow one cabbage plant because of the succession planting of it. So really decide what the best use of that space is, and really save your outside soil for something that it makes a lot more sense. Carrots, top of the middle row. Man, I'll tell you, I grew carrots in my hoop house all day long because it was one of my cash crops. Knowing you and your farm and your style, if it made sense to me, it may make sense to you. Don't let me or anybody else tell you that's not the right thing to do. Maybe don't rely on, hey, I think I just want to do this. Like, you really have to research if that makes sense for a longer term crop or one that takes up more space. Other factors, again, the cabbage scenario, man, you can buy cabbage. Look, folks, we are competing with the grocery store, okay, as farmers. And so your cabbage may be great, but you can't justify to anybody the cost of a greenhouse grown cabbage versus one at the store. It'd be a hard sell versus what you could do inside of a hoop house with some specialty crops or some higher value crops. Some of these plants need more sunlight, the root depth. Potatoes, I think you're really best growing those seasonally outside. Carrots, 50-50 for me. Parsnips could probably go outside a little bit more cold hardy. Frost blanket's your friend on that. The water requirements, you really have to look at your area and what your rainfall is and what your irrigation setup is. Big on lifespan, growing out of a vine to full maturity over the course of a summer and really maximizing every little bit of that one seed that you planted. That's a big one. Pest resilience, growing trap crops. So my example on there was we did have a pest infestation in my high tunnel one year, and we were really getting hammered. And so I grew out it was the Chinese noodle bean. They're long. They're about a foot to 16 inches long. They're purple. I would never grow that inside for a crop, but using it as a trap crop was a good thing to do, in that one Chinese noodle bean in the corner, we could either remove that whole plant once we got everything situated, or that's what we would just dose with neem oil, diatomaceous earth, the whole 9 yards, because we were never going to harvest off of that. Yield and efficiency, and again, some of these are going to just simply yield better outside. Some of them are going to yield better inside. Got to do your research, talk to those seed reps. When you're making these slides, it's like, I really want to talk about the cold hardiness of kale, Brussels sprouts, and turnips. I really want to talk about the open pollination of squash, pumpkin, and watermelon, but I don't want to repeat myself, so I'll kind of skip it. Again, water requirements. Nobody's going to grow rice in a hoop house, but I put that on there as an example of sometimes we'll get questions that's way on the other side because people get curious. But if we think about that standing water issue, it's going to cause more problems than you can. Peas require so much water because they're growing so fast that's going to cause a problem inside. So that's another reason that you would think about, if this plant requires something that would be detrimental to the hoop house and everything else, let's go ahead and move it out. Crop value, again, reserve your higher crop values for inside, lower crops outside. Just be observant, follow the successful farmers before you, but remember, longevity in the farm may or may not equal the best practices for you and your farm. Make friends with your seed reps, but what do I know? We're going to start getting into adjusting for temps. That is a wiffle ball on a piece of strapping. I'll go back. So that's how I like to put on plastic and shade cloth. We'll tie that other end to the shade cloth and just pull it over real easy. And so we're going to talk pretty brief about shade cloth, ventilation, irrigation. These are the things we can use to mitigate and control. We're getting into summer, so we're going to talk about heat. So shade cloth, color install options. We have the aluminum, we have black, we have white. Black would be for less of a temperature thing, but more of a light requirement thing, in that we don't want our plant to get so much light that it's detrimental, but we want to make sure that we're not blocking all the early season heat. So tomatoes, it's a tropical crop. They do like a lot of heat. Black shade cloth for me on that, versus, hey, we have flowers that need it a little bit more cool, but they still like the shade. So we're reducing the amount of light coming into the tunnel. It inherently makes it cooler. It inherently makes it better for the plants, better for the people working in there. But you really have to take a look at what that plant needs. We have a ton of resources on shade cloth. It's kind of the basics. Again, wiffle ball in the corner of the plastic, same thing. We throw that wiffle ball up, use another one to kind of put some surface area on the cloth itself or the plastic itself as we're pulling it, so it doesn't, like, you're not pulling on just a little tiny corner. You're pulling on a lot of plastic all at once. We do have shade cloth clips. We have the snap clamps, or we have spring wire that we put on, which is my personal favorite. I like to cut them about 12 to 16 foot increments and put them right in the lock channel. Because the air is going through the shade cloth, you don't have to nail that down like you would the plastic there. Two pictures up top. One on the left is a 50% shade. One on the right is a 30% shade, so you can kind of see the difference. Now this one, the shade was real close to the plant. I just wanted to show the daylight. The bottom is our monofilament shade cloth. There's two types of shade cloth out there. There is, you'll see it called tape, and you'll see the monofilament. They're both knitted. They both can take cut without having to be hemmed in the field or anything like that. But the way the monofilament works is as you're installing it and pulling it a little tight onto the hoop house there or the low tunnel, you're not getting that spread that tape would. And so if you have 50% and you're pulling it so much that the holes open up, you don't have 50% anymore. So monofilament corrects that. It's also a lot stronger. We're clearing out shade tape. So if you're in the market for shade cloth, we don't really have that much left. So take a look at that. But the monofilament, it's really the same price right now on our website because of the clearance, but it's so much better, so much stronger. And again, customers have been way happier with that. Now we're going to get into the ventilation. I'm going to talk about passive first, and passive is non-powered. So there's no power going to this. If you don't have power going out, these are a couple of options. Just a standard open vent that you would use for a soffit or a shed. You can attach lock channel, use a spring wire in there right on the plastic. They're so light, you really don't have to reinforcement. Some people will just open it all the way up to get that side ventilation at the plant level. And some people, again, will put the insect netting with a roll-up side. I can't imagine growing anywhere south of Kansas City without having roll-up sides because of the heat that we get. And so having that big, you're basically creating a door from hip board to baseboard, from end wall to end wall, to at the plant level, let all this cross ventilation happen. It also helps, especially if you have a vent up top, as that air is getting drawn into the hoop house, it's pushing that hot air up out if you give it a place to go. The picture on the top right is kind of an example of several things going on at once. We talk a lot about layers of control at Bootstrap Farmer when we're talking about heat. You see a shade cloth, you see a roll-up side with the insect netting, you see a circulation fan in there, and you also see, this is an active, in which we'll get to next, air intake. On the active air intake, it's powered by negative pressure, in which normally you would have the sides down because you're drawing in a lot, but I have seen people do it both ways, in which you have a powered unit typically attached to a thermostat. And if you don't want it to get too hot in there, you set the thermostat to your choice, let's say 95 degrees. As soon as you hit 95, that heat is building up. The fan comes on and it starts blowing air out. It's not blowing air in, it's blowing it out, which then creates a negative pressure on the other side. So the vent on the top right, it's on a hinge. And as soon as that, it doesn't seem like it's possible, but it happens. As soon as that vent, that powered fan goes on, it creates enough pressure, and they're aluminum fins there, so they open up real easy, and so it's drawing in fresh air. The argument I hear on that is, well, it's 100 degrees out, but you're bringing in 100-degree heat, how is that keeping it cool? Well, it's because it may be 120 degrees up at the top of your hoop house. So you're still inherently moving air, which if you're ever outside and it's hot and you stand in front of a fan, you felt that effect. And it's also bringing in just a few degrees lower. And when you mix that with proper irrigation and the shade cloth, you're knocking down a couple of degrees at a time. And then if we're still talking about the active ventilation, the picture on the top left, again, these are circulation fans, which are churning up that air and reducing hot spots. So if you've ever been in your house and you're like, it's hotter near a window versus maybe in the middle of a room, we're not circulating that air enough. That's why I have ceiling fans. Same thing, is we're just churning up the air enough to where you don't get those hot or cold spots. Works both seasons. Irrigation, plants, they're sucking up water. They're growing tall and straight because the water is basically coming out the top of the plant in a transpiration situation. That's how the plants keep cool, just like how people sweat. Having the proper irrigation before you need it is a big thing. I see people try to install it after the fact. Usually doesn't work out too well. Question becomes, do I need drip? Do I need overhead? Overhead for when you first transplant and the roots are very, very small, and if you have a 30-inch row and you have a dripper and it may just be dripping in this little spot, the roots aren't big enough yet. So for the first 2-3 weeks, depending on the crop, you're going to have to need some type of way to saturate the whole ground. And as those roots develop, you can turn off the overheads, switch over to drip, and you're good to go for the rest of the season. I'm a big fan of mechanical timers. This one was at a big box store. We also sell mechanical timers that you can take a look at. Pipe that right in. I promise if you don't have a timer, you will leave your water on and cause some of those standing water issues at one point. Everybody does it. Don't feel too bad. Forgive yourself. All right. Well, listen, everybody, thanks for tuning in. Just one last little thing. I know we've been getting this questions at the trade shows we've been going to. Obviously, people are there's concerns about tariffs no matter where you fall on the aisle. I do want to remind everybody that our steel is U.S. based. The raw steel itself is coming out of Michigan. It's rolled in Chicago. It's put into the tubes in Chicago, and it's fabricated right here in Texas. So the tariffs are eventually going to impact the United States in that as things get higher, prices are going to fluctuate, and nobody really knows what's going to happen. And you're likely to see it more affected in supply chain issues in that we're not going to be bringing as much stuff in. So no matter what, if you're even thinking about it, it costs $0 to get a bid from Julian, in which him and the rest of the tech team can walk you through some of the specifics. And at least you know kind of like what you're up against. But as of right now, I think we're sitting in a really good position at Bootstrap Farmer, because we've always sourced U.S. We've already have the relationships with not only suppliers, but our fabrication partners. And I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, that this is a good time, if you're thinking about it, to at least get a bid. It won't cost you anything. And again, we do things like this. We answer the phone 7 days a week. We've got extensive YouTube stuff. If you have any more questions, give us a call. Feel free to email us anytime.